Welcome to the First Unitarian Society of Milwaukee's online worship service. I'm Reverend Jennifer Nordstrom, and I'm honored to serve as the First Unitarian Society of Milwaukee's senior minister. We welcome people of all genders, sexualities, ages, races, ethnicities, histories, and bodies. We welcome your mind, your heart, and your spirit. We welcome all you're bringing with you today and all your heart longs to set down. We'd like to pay a special welcome to guests who are joining us today. If you're visiting for the first time or joining us from afar, why don't you say hello in the chat now and tell us where you're joining us from? I welcome everyone into our worship service by inviting you to repeat our first church mission after me. We gather to nurture the spirit, engage the mind, and inspire action. Let's go now to our beloved sanctuary to light the chalice, which is the symbol of Unitarian Universalism.
Hello, my name is Joby Clark, and I am your worship associate this morning. I must confess there's a bit of a prelude to today's worship story, this service focusing on widening the circle and all. When I first chatted with Reverend Jennifer about the focus of today's service, I confessed to her that I don't really feel like widening my circle at all these days. You may feel the same. As only a minister can, she validated my feelings and responded, "That's okay. Sometimes our circle gets widened regardless." Indeed. Sometimes our circle is widened long before we have any say in the matter. Before my sister and I came into the world, my parents, Susan and Jonathan Bernstein, were busy pursuing their own youthful dreams. In the early 1970s, they arrived in Ithaca, New York, where my father could pursue a doctorate at Cornell, and my mother would become the first female radio newscaster in upstate New York. It was at this time that my father would meet and become lifelong friends with a young man by the name of Dennis McClure, another doctoral student pursuing Russian studies. While these two young men certainly shared academic interests, their backgrounds couldn't have been more different. Where my dad grew up with few siblings, a Jewish city kid in Queens, New York, Denny hailed from a large Catholic family in rural Michigan. Where my own grandparents had gotten their feet under them after the Great Depression and were able to provide for their two boys in the 1940s, shoes and furniture were a scarcity in Denny's household. Both my father and Denny were voracious readers, though, and could debate Soviet politics long into the early morning hours. This friendship was the means to uncovering their own blind spots, the value of which would be shared with their spouses and children in the decades to follow. Indeed, the circle of this friendship would in turn widen to me as well. Denny became a surrogate uncle to my sister and me as we transitioned from childhood into adulthood, his laughter and cigarette smoke rolling over us as he quoted some excerpt from a book. When my sister and I became parents, the circle widened further still, Denny becoming a surrogate great uncle to all of our kids. It was Denny I turned to when my son was diagnosed with celiac disease, a condition Denny shared as well. But it was in 2016, when a new administration rocked the country, that I realized Denny's greatest strength. He knew the value in finding common ground and pondered at the fracturing of the country. After all, to embrace his roots and his curiosity in equal measure, he had deliberately and consciously opened himself to those whose thinking was foreign to him again and again. With his mentoring, I saw the fallacy in my either-or thinking and recognized the value in being open to a wider circle, even as I daydreamed about drawing hard and fast lines in the sand. During the pandemic, Denny got me through more than one tough day of juggling work, isolation, and the kids' virtual school. And thus it was a tremendous blow to receive a phone call in October that he had suffered a massive heart attack, ending his life. Denny's passing is one of 3 tribal elders my family has lost this year, men whose character mere words will not do justice. But while I feel a strong urge to fold up and shrink my circle at this time, the simple truth of it is that sometimes our circle gets widened long before we have any say in the matter. What's more, you just might be that special someone, an Uncle Denny who can widen the circle for another.
Draw the circle wide. Draw the circle wide. No one is alone, we'll be side by side. Draw the circle wide.
Draw the circle wide. Draw the circle wide. No one is alone, we'll be side by side. Draw the circle wide.
Draw the circle wide, draw it wider still. Let this be our song. No one is alone, we'll be side by side.
No one is alone.
Draw the circle wide.
Draw the circle wide, draw it wider still. Let this be our song. No one is alone, we'll be side by side. No one is alone.
Draw the circle wide.
In your sadness and in your grief, from the pain it seems there's no relief. We will hold you until the storm subsides. We'll draw the circle wide.
Draw the circle wide, draw it wider still. Let this be our song. No one is alone, we are side by side. No one is alone.
Draw the circle wide.
Draw the circle wide, draw
circle wide.
Draw the circle wide. Draw the circle. 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 Draw the circle.
Draw it this wide.
Oh, that did my heart good. Thank you so much to our sibling congregation, the Fellowship in California, and my colleagues there who I actually went to seminary with. It was such a delight. Thank you so much. Barbara Kingsolver's 2012 book entitled Flight Behavior tells the story of misadventuring monarch butterflies migrating between Canada, the United States, and Mexico. Or it tells the story of climate change's disastrous effects on the delicate balance of life. But really, it tells the story of a family in rural Tennessee whose circle gets widened by butterflies. At the outset of the book, the young mother of the family, Della Robbia, is desperate for some connections outside her stay-at-home life of mothering two very young children. Smart, ambitious Della Robbia feels like she's suffocating in boredom. When she marches up the side of the mountain behind her family's farm one day, fleeing her life, she runs into the strangest sight she's ever seen. She rounds a corner and she sees the trees ablaze, burning without fire. She smells no smoke, hears no crackle, and yet she sees moving trails of orange waft around every fir. Without her glasses that day, Della Robbia can't imagine what she's witnessing, but nevertheless, she is awestruck. Kingsolver writes, "Unearthly beauty had appeared to her, a vision of glory to stop her in the road. For her alone, these orange boughs lifted, these long shadows became a brightness rising. It looked like the inside of joy, a valley of lights and ethereal wind. It had to mean something. The burning trees, they were put there to save her." Della Robbia stares in wonder at this miracle, this burning bush that is not consumed, and feeling that it's meant to save her and her alone, she vows to change her life, to be a better person, to recommit to her family, to live a life more in line with what she cares about most. She goes home. And like many of us who have had a big epiphany, she's surprised to find her life is not much changed, despite the drastic inner transformation. So she begins making small changes. telling her mother-in-law to stop bad-mouthing the neighbors, insisting her husband include her in family decisions. But when she learns that her father-in-law has signed a contract with a logging company to log those miraculous burning trees, she finally makes a big change. She revolts and she insists the entire family go up together and investigate what she knows in her heart is a miracle made for her. Together, they traipse up the mountain and discover that Della Robbia's burning bush is actually a migration of monarch butterflies come to overwinter in the Tennessee mountains for the first time in history. Della Robbia's mother-in-law starts taking people on tours to see the butterflies for $5 a pop, and the family wonders if maybe the butterflies can save their mountain from logging. More people come to see the butterflies from all over, and they start staying in hotels in town and spending money at restaurants and stores, and the small, poverty-stricken rural Tennessee town begins to believe that the butterflies came to save them all. Della Robbia begrudgingly shares her personal miracle, first with her family and then with her town. One day, a butterfly tourist shows up and he spends the whole day up on the mountain. When he comes down, the family learns that he's a butterfly scientist, come all the way from New Mexico to learn why the butterflies have suddenly changed their migration route. Della Robbia is flustered with this outsider coming in and telling her new facts about her personal miracle. Part of her feels like the scientist is taking away her butterflies and making them his or science's. But when the scientist returns with more scientists to study the butterflies, Della Robbia finds her life strangely expanding. The miracle is more complicated than what she had originally thought. The scientists set up their lab in her backyard. They even hire her as an assistant, and the money that they pay for rent and labor not only solves the logging problem, it gives her family enough financial breathing room to buy things like toys for the kids and even start saving for a computer. But the strangest thing is that Della Robbia's world gets larger every time she learns something new. As she works with the scientists, she learns new words, entire new vocabularies, and eventually new worlds of ideas about how things work. Every time we add another person to our lives, we expand our horizons, we draw our circle wider with their experiences and perspectives. They bring their unique self and gifts to us. Gifts like the ones our new members are bringing to our First Church community. The universal language of music, the gift of loving nature or learning, the gift of yearning to be part of a larger community and learning from that community. Each new human brings their own infinity into our lives. The miracle of all the moments that they've amassed, their knowledge, the place they call home, the DNA and family history they carry in their very bodies, they bring their own map to add to our world, opening us up to so much more. Della Robbia feels herself opening up in wonder when she learns that monarch butterflies migrate from Canada and all over the United States to Mexico, that they have some sort of internal map that spans generations. Somehow, the butterflies who begin the journey in the north pass this map down to their children and grandchildren, each of whom completes a portion of the journey that none of them fully sees or knows. Next month, in March, our community will finally come back to church in person while simultaneously keeping our online services going. Our small groups will be able to meet in person in the building and have people on Zoom from further away. We're going to learn and relearn how to do church together. We don't have a map for this. We've never done it before. We have some internal compass pointing us towards community, and each of us knows a part of the journey, but its full length and its ultimate destination are unknown. I wonder if you too have some journey you're on right now, destination unknown. What would it be like for you to close your eyes and trust your internal map will be there, spanning generations and guiding you? Our church world is going to expand and change. We'll go from the personal, intimate blessing of online worship into the larger community blessing of worship together. We'll have online options for worship and small groups, so geographic proximity will not be necessary in order to be a member at First Church. Our borders will expand. In fact, they already have. People who found us online will join us in person, having never been in the building before, and more people will join us online and be able to be members from wherever they are. The edges of what we know as church are growing. Our circles are broadening to include new people, people who are different and people who are similar, but people who bring new infinities of experience and reality that will teach us things we have never known, creating new patterns of beauty in our community. Growth always means change, and there will be loss with that. The caterpillar turns into a butterfly and loses its caterpillarness forever. When Della Robbia goes to work for the scientists studying the butterflies, she pays a friend to watch her children. And when the children come home, they come with entirely new experiences outside of her knowing. She begins to see the shape of their world beyond her, and it is a blessing, but it is also a loss. Her older child, Preston, becomes fascinated with the butterflies and all things natural science. He wants more than their small world has been able to offer. One afternoon, shopping at a thrift store, Preston asks Della Robbia to buy him an entire set of encyclopedias so he can read about more animals and natural science. The encyclopedias are part of a huge display of books that are advertised as being $1 each. Now, Della Robbia can afford to buy one of them, but not the entire set of 16. She explains that to her son, and he is heartbroken. But he argues back with her, something that Preston doesn't usually do. He says, if the books are just one thing, one entity, they should be $1, like it advertised. Della Robbia is impressed with her 5-year-old son's bargaining skills, so she sends him up to the cashier to make his case. Kingsolver writes, when the cashier gave his verdict, they saw Preston's whole body react, the pump of his fist, the faintly audible hiss of yes. He turned and looked back towards his mother, meeting her eyes with a cocksure expression wholly unlike anything she knew of her son. she felt pierced by loss, he would go far. Maybe she had the same stuff inside, the same map of the big picture, but the goods had passed through her to lodge in her son and awaken him. Already he had the means and the will for the journey. Five years ago, our congregation set out on a journey together towards a vision of who we wanted to become as a community. Hundreds of our First Church members and youth and children sat together and talked and drew pictures and made art of who we might become if we lived into our most beautiful, most outlandish, most fully, gorgeously you selves. These pictures show a vibrant, bustling community of all ages and races, singing together, worshiping together, making justice out in the community together. There were musical instruments and children's field trips and dancing. The images showed happy people together, both within the walls of our congregation, but also bursting out beyond them in relationship with and serving the broader community. When we created those images together 5 years ago, we had no way of imagining the journey that we would be on today. We are still on that journey, going to that vision of expanded horizons, just like the millions of monarch butterflies that somehow migrate together from all over the US and Canada to the mountains of Southwest Mexico, traveling hundreds, sometimes thousands of miles, just by paying attention to their internal compass and being present in what's happening in the world. They've never been to their destination before, but these millions of monarch butterflies trust that compass to guide them on the long and unknown journey to their destination. The place that we're going as a church community is new. We've never been there before. We've never done any of this before. We've never left the church building and then come back to it 2 years later. We've never had more than a small number of members of color. We've never tried to have all of our meetings and worship and religious education accessible both in person and online at the same time. Our generation has never tried to minister to an entire community traumatized by loss and grief in a global pandemic that has taken so many and shaken us all, upending our lives and communities and relationships. But 100 years ago, 4 generations ago, this church lived through the Spanish flu. And it grew into this community we are today, a bustling people our ancestors never could have imagined, of various ages and races and backgrounds and genders and sexualities. We too will pass this church down to the descendants of our wildest dreams, an intentionally multiracial, multi-generational community of various abilities and histories and genders and sexualities who come together in harmony and equity to celebrate life and hold one another in grief and keep working together to make the world a better place. We hold the map to get there in our bodies, in our longing for a beauty and a wholeness that is greater than what we know now, even if we don't know what the journey will be yet. Our children will go further on that journey than we will. The map will get passed down through generations, completed by children, grandchildren, and even great-grandchildren that we do not yet know. There will be loss in some of the change, and we will grieve, and that's okay. The church is not going to be exactly as we remember, and grief for what is gone is normal and it's human. But to live, to survive, means to change, to flow with the unfolding of history and community, evolving and growing with each new infinite human added to it. We already have the means and the will for the journey, and we have our internal compass, our longing for wholeness that will guide us along. We don't know every turn of the road, but we know our companions, and we trust our compass to keep taking us further into community, further into justice and equity, further into a wholeness that is blessed by every circle expanding, horizon broadening soul who joins us along the way. Come, First Church. Let us journey there together. May it be so. It has been a blessing to be together. May you go out from here nourished and renewed, and use that to choose to bless the world. Until we meet again, may you be held, may you be healed, may you be whole. Blessed be, and amen.
We are going, heaven knows where we are going. We know within, and we will get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. Whoa, yeah, yeah. Whoa, yeah, yeah. Whoa, yeah, yeah. Whoa, yeah, yeah. Whoa, yeah,